Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Geopolitics with Mark. I got a sense you guys wanted to get another movie out of me or another video, another update. What are my predictions for what's going on in Gaza and Ukraine? And I'm pretty much going to say the same thing that I've been saying from the very beginning, that at this stage, everything is very dangerous. You know, um, they really have to know what they're doing. They really have to contain their fights to their part of the world. Otherwise, it's just like it's an absurdity. It's like the biggest. All kinds of damage for what trade offs. You have to wonder what the species is thinking. Um, with regards to you know Ukraine and Russia, I think that if you end the war along the lines of a nuclear treaty, a comprehensive nuclear treaty between America, Russia, China, India, Pakistan, Israel, all the nuclear powers basically have a comprehensive nuclear treaty. This is a way to save face for Ukraine, that the Ukrainians didn't die in vain, that they weren't set up, that they weren't used by the West to basically try to dismantle Russia or to try to, damage Russia through some war of attrition, which Europe is pretending now that it's going to pick up and continue, which is just clearly too expensive and not feasible, given the technology that Russia has, given the much better industrial complex they have prepared, where it's about winning the battles, not about how are we going to sell the weapons that are going to make us the most amount of money. So their arms industry complexes it's like decades ahead of what we have, not only in terms of the technology that's being fielded, but the capacity to produce it, the political will to produce it if it's the necessary thing to produce to be successful on the battlefield, given the conditions, and not just who's lobbying and talking about how useful they think it's going to be that wins. So, anyway, guys, with respect to Iran, the way that I see it is that um, if there's a war, I've been saying this for, I don't know, probably years, and this is what I've foreseen this situation as a possibility. Just like I've seen nuclear war as a possibility right around this time, where, there'd be the whole of North America, the whole of the world would be up in nuclear flames, and everybody's just like scurrying around in the nuclear apocalypse, or like the what comes after the um the fallout, living in the fallout. It's a small chance. I think the better chance, and is you want to have that big treaty between America, Russia, China. If you have a solid treaty along a nuclear treaty with the nuclear powers, you get nuclear containment to one nation. You can tell the Ukrainians post haste, hey guys, it was really weird how you got set up for that war against Russia, and how finally there was like a nuclear treaty that ended the possibility for there to be a nuclear war. I think that's what it was all about, and blah blah blah, and not just about finding some excuse to have a war to send money to the arms industry. The arms industry can make so much more money going building for the space industrial complex. It just creates a whole bunch of projects in space, and these projects will actually be useful. It's not wars that are cooked up under false pretense. These are like expensive projects that have a chance of really helping the world, like asteroid defense. You can sink trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars into asteroid defense, But if your system misses that asteroid, whoops, that's a lot of wasted trillions, but you're still going to spend those trillions in hopes that your system will actually do something to, help in defending Earth when the time comes for an apocalyptic asteroid to remake the Earth. I think that's the phase that we're at, is that the military industrial complex in America has to get retooled to the space industrial complex. It's a very simple transition. It's a very simple pivot where nobody's going to lose. It's a win-win-win-win. It's like the arms industry is going to win because the contracts are never ending. It's going to be just as good, if not, and better. It's going to be better contracts. They're going to drop their current contracts. They're going to get better contracts, and the potential future contracts is better, much better, because it's useful what they're producing. It's going to be useful indefinitely. They're going to build things in space. They're going to use asteroids that they're going to mine things in space that they're then going to use to build platforms and space habitats, and then defense systems to protect Earth from asteroids, etc. Then long distance ships and all kinds of stuff. Space platforms, like trillions of dollars is going to be spent in space that would have been spent on military that would not have been needed, because in today's day and age, the utility of warfare is much lower. The trade-offs are much lower. You're risking destroying the world to like cow a country out of its resources, when really what you could have been doing is saving all that money on a expensive occupation of the world through all kinds of bases. Spend that money on investing in yourself, in the infrastructure, and then when you need a trough like the military industrial complex, in which it has become majorly, you don't put it into something like Ukraine. You put it into something like the space industrial complex. You just pour trillions of dollars into space platforms, telescopes, asteroid intercepts, anything you can think of that you can spend tons of money into space, and it's going to be useful for all of humanity. It's, the age of war is over. It's not economically feasible. The trade-offs aren't there. Cooking up fake wars is just too contrived. We've already seen this with Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, this whole Middle East project, which brings us to Iran. So, if this war with Iran happens, what they're going to do is they're going to aim for Israel's infrastructure. It's the simplest thing to do. You keep a conventional war. You minimize the casualties, but you disrupt the state, where it's like, we cannot stay here because we don't have heating. We don't have utilities, we don't have water, we don't have sewage, etc., etc. That's what's going to happen in Israel if they start a war with Iran. At least that's been my prediction for a long time. I don't know. I've been making videos. Maybe you can find a video of this a few years ago, me saying this. That's my prediction. So, I don't believe they're not going to be targeting for damage. They're not going to be looking to bomb out neighborhoods. That's not their style. They're not like this is not Gaza. They're not going to treat Israel like Gaza. What they are going to do is they're going to make it an unlivable nation, an absolutely unlivable nation without the use of nuclear weapons, making it so that, people will have to evacuate. Where will they go? Wherever the lobby is the strongest. America, probably America. You're going to have Israel exit Israel and enter America, enter Europe. Really, Europe should be paying their way, giving them citizenship, paying for housing, basic income, that basic socialism that should exist everywhere anyway, especially should be existing for Israelis whose state will probably be shut down, and they'll need a place to go. And they were Europeans for 2,000 years before this. Now they're set up in the desert and the state's going to implode. Well, I think in North America, that's where they should be sent, in a situation like this. Given the relationship with America and Israel, America, here, you're imploding state, your people need a place to go. Here are all the passports to come to America. And, here's housing, here's income, etc. So, this is how I see the future. I mean, this is how I see the future of conflicts. I see the end of the war in Ukraine as contingent on this greater power dynamic between America and Russia, which can be blessed by China. So you have this like major party agreement, like, okay, we're never going to go to war with one another. And then we have this nuclear treaty, and all the nuclear powers are getting together about it. And oh my God, these poor Ukrainians, they got set up so bad, and who's taking care of them? The nations that are doing the best about this are going to be the ones that will win the favor of the Ukrainians in the reconstruction. You may get a situation where Ukrainians are favoring the Russians when it all is said and done, after they figure out, how much the West had actually been there to set them up for this, war against Russia. That their whole existence, imagine since 2000, all the schools are American propaganda institutions to get them to hate Russians. So you have this curriculum set up by the State Department, propaganda to hate Russians, put into Ukraine. And so now the Ukrainians don't know who they are. They're just a product of whatever the American State Department is telling them they are, to keep them divided, to have this horribly anti-Russian perspective, so that they can then use them to go and battle Russia to the death. It's unbelievable the way that an entire generation of young people was used. And then once they wake up to that, you may have a situation where Russia and Ukraine form a super army, where it's like they get over their war wounds and they realize, holy shit, the West set us up into fighting one another over this fantasy that, Russia would be broken up, and now they're going to use us over here to do that. And they're, going to send an entire generation of young people to the meat grinder without any consideration for whether or not they succeed or not. I don't know, guys. It's a very, that's how I see it over there. I mean, it's just, it's an unfortunate situation, and then, yeah. So, yeah, I think right now it's most of the podcasts that I'm going to, it's showing that there's a lot of excitement about what's potentially about to happen in Iran because of the buildup of forces around Iran, and because that the operation in Venezuela happened. Why would they be building up forces around Iran? And it's just it looks strange. So they have to do something, or it would look silly, or it's part of their deliberate, strategery. To me, I think they're going to try war with Iran. Iran is going to shut down the infrastructure this is, if the war begins, Iran will shut down the state. Iran will shut down the state of Israel. You'll have fleeing refugees. At that stage, you should have Europe extending, opening to the fleeing European Jews. It's likely they won't have that together, knowing how Europe is today, the leadership, not the population, but just in terms of their ability, their failure to create the ability to absorb any immigration because of an economic policy that didn't tax the rich. So now you don't have the capacity to house people. to put them into employment, to take care of their health care, to take care of their education. So this is everywhere in the Western economies. You have these failing systems because they don't tax the rich, they don't reinvest into the public infrastructure, which is really what's needed. And yeah, so you're going to have European Jews looking for a place to live. At this point in time, because of history, they should be granted a place in Europe, one of 27 countries they could go to. But the fact that Europe is in such a weakened position because Nord Stream got blown up, because they don't tax the rich, because you have Ukraine, you have this weakened European state that's like volatile. And so I would say that, if Israel implodes, you send all the emigres to North America. It's much more safe in North America. From my experience, I don't remember any racism from elementary school, to through high school in Northern Virginia, so it's, the idea that there's no place for them to go to get them into a frenzied state. It's just like, it's really mean. It's not true, and it's just like, it's exploiting people's emotions to, to get something better, or what's perceived as better, but it's not actually better in the long run, which is all this land by force, which if you're trying to maintain land by force, it's so exhausting, because it's like people are resentful, and if people can fight back, they're going to fight back. And, it's much better it's much better to have if you're moving in somewhere, you want to have them embrace your move in, through prosperity, through, doing nice things. And if it's expensive to make everything correct, well, then you have to send the bill to who owes the bill, which is Europe. That's the biggest thing I don't like about this force approach in the Middle East, is it totally ignores the well-being of the locals, the natives. It puts the onus on them instead of Europe. Europe should be paying the bills to create an entire region of prosperity, even if that means using Chinese construction equipment. You know what I mean? It should be the best quality, lowest cost, highest tech, region to serve a population, so that everybody's happy, so that nobody has the idea, I'm going to be sending rockets because I'm upset, because nobody's upset, because everybody has what they need. And if they didn't, Europe would be paying the bill. So that's sort of I've been saying that about this Palestine, Israel, Europe issue, that basically, Europe is a bad guy in all of this, that Europe now owes the Palestinians. All the damage happening to the Palestinians is now, Palestinians can claim the damages out of Europe, because it's Europe that's the cause of the exodus of all these people into the land to begin with. Not that they're responsible for what they did after they entered the land, but this is exactly, there was no, what were they to imagine? They were to imagine that something like this wasn't going to happen when that was their only option. That they're moving to a land without a people, with people there. This kind of stuff since 1945. So Europe has been a poor actor, I think, in trying to resettle the people that it wreaked hell. It wreaked hell on these people, these European Jews, and it didn't follow up with what they were facing on their landing to their new home. So it just shows, kind of a disingenuous, supposed leader of the moral world to not have these things squared away, to be unleashing more residual damage on an unrelated group, namely the Palestinians. So that's how I feel about all that. And anyway, guys, I'll just put this video up, and I hope to make a new video soon. And Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting world. I mean, if there are major changes in the world, don't worry, we're going to get through it together. I really believe the world is going to actually eventually turn into a single nation, that we're actually following the intelligence of the species. They were just kind of going through a radical, weird, warped time where you have the gross inequalities and like, really weird shapes and things, but in actuality, the species, it wants to organize in the most efficient, effective way so that it can maximize the number of people it has at its disposal, while also that they're comfortable individually so that they can operate efficiently within a global system. So we're going to turn into a single nation globally. That's what I see is happening slowly and surely, that it's like people want to think about their flags and all this, but when you start thinking about it, you're like, yeah, we're like a species. And what would the species be doing? Oh, yeah, it'd probably be trying to organize into like a super nation. That way it would be much easier when we have to go and rumble with ET, or we have to go travel the distance in the universe. So all these wars today, I think, are are redundant. It's just like wars should not have been happening since World War I, and basically they're finding that the cost benefits are not there. The potential costs are catastrophic. The benefits are marginal compared to catastrophic, and so war is becoming less and less useful. But what is useful is battling asteroids, asteroid defense, space industrial complex, asteroid defense, things that are going to destroy all of humanity, that the whole of the world could be working together to prevent. That kind of stuff is basically like the time that we're spending now detracting from that goal, basically creates an element of being unlucky. We're going to have unlucky karma going into the future if all we're doing is warring among ourselves on Earth, when we have these looming Earth killer asteroids that we're literally creating through bad karma, the potential for an Earth extincting event that wouldn't have otherwise been there had we not been waging wars that are outdated anyway. So, anyway, guys, I appreciate you tuning into my channel. Please click a like. Please click a subscribe. It's a really trying time. It's a really confusing time. It seems like very, so urgent and so desperate at the same time. But, I think eventually America is going to find its place in the world as the real estate central, where basically it's going to fix up its cities. It's going to provide for its people. There's going to be social housing, and that's not going to be too expensive to maintain for the government. So they're going to do it. And once they have social housing in place, basically they don't have to worry about the price of private housing. So now they open up private housing to the world. You're going to have all kinds of money from Asia wanting to buy homes on the coasts, in the mountains, luxury estates and things like that. And that's going to bring in tremendous amounts of money for the government. The government's going to make money on real estate sales, citizenship sales to North America. That's not going to have any industry, but we're going to have housing. We're going to be the bedroom of the world. We're going to be incredibly accessible, that you can get to America from anywhere in the world in almost a few hours. We'll have super airports and things like that. It'll require a lot of upgrading. It'll require a lot of commitment to the domestic population. That we're going to be we're going to have a bifurcated economy, that we're going to have the economy for the locals, that we're going to socialize, because we know that we don't have jobs for the majority of people who are from here, who live here. But we need to make our money from all the money pouring in to the real estate that's going to get into the private real estate But when it jacks up that private real estate price, it's not going to affect the locals because they have social housing. So I think we need to think about the economy like that, and I think we'll be successful in the long run. We shouldn't be thinking, hey guys, let's go back to colonialism. Let's try to become like the British Empire again. It's almost like since World War II, we've been taking the British as the example, that we've been drifting into colonialism. We've been using the institutions following World War II that were meant to secure financial stability in the world. We're using those very same institutions as institutions to undermine developing nations into systems of servitude and indebtedness to the West that's supposedly helping them, to the benefit of our shareholders, of our corporations, that are going to keep those very same nations in a systematic state of indebtedness and servitude that would be like you would find in the British Empire. So America became like the British Empire after World War II. But now, because China exists, because developing countries have the opportunity to get their development assistance through China, there's now a second option. And America has to basically compete with China, and the developing countries are saying, hey, hold on a second, we don't want to be little colonies of America. We don't want to be little neo colonies. And so America is getting desperate. It's like, oh no, Europe is losing its empires. Africa is shaking out France, and you have Traore, who's like, in Burkina Faso, also shaking out the vestiges of colonial empire. And America has lost its number one status in terms of having the technology of it's number one in 59 out of 64 high-tech areas, China, in producing high-tech products. America used to be number one in 59 out of 64 just 20 years ago. So there's been a major flip in who is dominant in producing the goods themselves, like in designing the goods themselves. Who is number one? It's now China. It used to be America. And so this major flip now means that China has the design, China has the companies. So as soon as you have the design, you can just create the companies. And of course, now there's 10 times as many Chinese companies, per American company, and the American company isn't that competitive anymore because it doesn't have the number one high tech. So, here come back our oligarchs. They have to put up barriers, so they can't sell BYD into North America. They can't sell Huawei into North America, to protect our shitty, more expensive products, that we're going to push onto our population like we do everything else. And so, yeah, it's they're crying about the fact that they're no longer number one in the products, because it was great. I mean, it was like they were making money like kings without paying taxes, and everything would have worked. But now they have all these jacked up stocks, unjustifiably inflated stocks that would have been true 20 years ago, when America would have maintained a number one position in China. But that's no longer the case. There's no way that could be the case. And so you have too much money in the stock market. It's going to collapse. You're going to have major corrections. Yeah, it's really an exciting time, guys. This is this is what I'm thinking right now about the current events. So I hope you subscribe, and I hope you click on the like, and there's much more to talk about, but these are kind of like the major things that are happening right now. Sort of it's like America has to rethink its vision about how it relates to the world, and I think it's going to profit if it does. It's going to if it's spent basically if it retools its military industrial complex into the space industrial complex, that's going to be a huge beginning of a new chapter in the world and America, where it can actually spend money to improve people's lives while also making people rich as well. So this is there's great optimism there.